physical and chemical properties of elements. An element is a substance made from only one type of atom. For example, oxygen is an element because it is made only of oxygen atoms. Everything around us is made from elements, and each element has its own unique properties. Elements can be found on the periodic table, which we will explore in more detail later on. Each element has its own set of properties, which can be divided into physical properties and chemical properties. Physical properties are characteristics we can observe or measure without changing the element into a new substance. On the other hand, chemical properties describe how a substance behaves in a chemical reaction and can only be observed when a chemical change happens. Our first example of a physical property is appearance, which describes whether an element is shiny or dull. Most metals are shiny, while non-metals are usually dull. Our next example is states of matter. This tells us whether an element is a solid, liquid, or gas at room temperature. Most metals are solids. For example, sodium and calcium are all solid. There are some exceptions, however, as mercury is a liquid at room temperature. Non-metals tend to vary more, with oxygen and hydrogen existing as gases, but carbon is a solid at room temperature. Another physical property is conductivity, which is how well a substance carries electricity or heat. Metals like copper are good conductors, which is why they are used in electrical wires. Metals are also used to make cooking pans. As they are good conductors of heat, they can transfer thermal energy quickly and evenly from the heat source to the food, allowing it to cook efficiently. Malleability means a material can be hammered into shape, and ductility means it can be drawn into wires. Metals are usually malleable and ductile, while non-metals are often brittle, which means they break easily rather than bend. Next up, we have density, which describes how heavy something is for its size. Metals tend to be dense and strong. This is because their atoms are arranged in layers. Non-metals have lower density as their molecules tend to be further apart. Now let's move on to chemical properties. An example of a chemical property is reactivity, which explains how easily an element reacts. Sodium reacts very quickly while gold reacts very slowly. Corrosion, such as rusting, happens when metals react slowly with oxygen and water. Finally, metals usually form positive ions as they lose electrons, whilst non-metals tend to form negative ions as they gain electrons or share electrons. In this video, we have learnt the difference between physical and chemical properties of elements. We have understood examples of physical properties and why these properties grant an element its function in our everyday life. Finally, we have looked at some chemical properties and understood the concept of reactivity.